We mustn't forget that organized crime is operating on this playing field.
Most footballers have a lot of bad habits. They drink, they womanize, they gamble, and they party. You think by playing football they can make money to do all this? I doubt so.
Profits from match fixing and gambling are at least as high as profits from the drug trade.
Genauso hoch wie im Bereich des Rauschgifthandels.
Big business, big business.
Little by little, a creeping illness has taken hold of international sport, gambling fraud. The fight against it, a war in a new dimension, highly technological and bewilderingly complex. This malaise has infected the entire organism, but soccer's been hit the hardest. In Berlin's parks and in stadiums across the globe, the gambling industry is everywhere. Sport has been on the wrong track for some time now. It's become a business of greed, out of control. Sunday morning in Wühlheide Park, Berlin, Germany. Youth soccer, the under-19s. No pushing and shoving. No chanting. 44 paying spectators. A local affair. At the same time, 10,000 kilometers away, big-time Asian bookies are raking in the earnings. Their turnover running into millions. Some of it even on German youth teams, as in Berlin's Wühlheide Park and elsewhere.
I could bet like maybe 1 million Sing dollars. Maybe that's like about 700,000–800,000 euro. Maybe I can squeeze to 1.5 million also. But the amateur games, I could go up to about 2 or 3 million.
The gambling machine is fueled by games. Games right across the globe, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A machine that doesn't even stop at German youth players in Wühlheide Park.
You can place bets on the under-19 Bundesliga. I didn't know that. I think that's scandalous. Under-19s, there's no easier way to fix a match. Take 1 or 2 lads who don't come from a rich family with deep pockets. So I pick one of them out and say, hey, missed the goal on purpose. Let them score a goal. Or foul one of them in the penalty area. It's totally crazy.
Low-profile matches in the lower divisions with badly paid players. That's the stuff gambling fraud's made of.
Some German people came here and they bet on these games, right? And they betted like 8 games, and 8 of them came out to be the right score, and everything worked as planned. And the amounts they bet is huge amount. So how can you bet? Why should you bet under 19 game so much when you don't have information?
We want to find out whether long-distance betting really works. So we bet 10 euros that more than 4 goals would be scored at an A-youth match in Berlin. However, there are no signs of match fixing here. What's scary are the financial dimensions in comparison to the gate receipts this day in Germany. Takings at the turnstiles, double figures. Gamblers' revenues in Asia, 6 figures. And the fact that some German youth matches have been fixed. The criminal investigation authorities have evidence to that effect. After intercepting telephone conversations, a special investigating team got wise to the godfathers of German gambling.
The district court in Bochum condemned these acts and viewed them as especially reprehensible. We found evidence of payments of up to 50 or 100 euros to these youths who were 16 or 17 years old at the time. They took the money without realizing what they were getting themselves into, and then they were kicked out of their clubs and their careers were over. The ringleaders placed bets of up to 10,000 euros on youth matches and made profits of up to 70,000 euros.
And that's just the warm-up phase. Since 2009 and the launch of the most extensive international investigation against gambling fraud ever, Bochum has identified almost 700 matches as fixed. A UEFA list showed that fraud extends from the youth matches to the second division of the Bundesliga, plus international matches, the Champions League and the Europa League. Players take to the pitch for a routine match. Maribor versus Bruges, Europa League. A memorable evening. That's a game we won't forget in a hurry. A German coach, just as clueless as the 10,000 spectators in Slovenia.
Das war ganz kurios.
It was very strange.
Da wurde mir
On the evening before the match, a source from the Balkans told me over the phone that I should watch this game.
dass ich mir doch dieses Spiel ansehen soll.
What happened? Maribor were leading by 2 perfectly correct goals and an own goal and were 3-0 ahead by the 73rd minute. The Belgians had no chance. And then it happened. What the unsuspecting Belgian press called the miracle of Maribor.
Mir wurde bestätigt, dass die
I received confirmation that the away team was going to win this game. That meant they had to score 4 goals within the space of 15 or 20 minutes.
And that's exactly what happened. As if they came straight off the conveyor belt.
Es wurden damals
According to my information, huge sums were bet at the time, and that's exactly how it turned out. One team had built up an amazing lead, only to lose in the
sehr
end.
hoch geführt und schlussendlich verloren.
I will answer in English, then I can only say, like Winston Churchill, never ever give up. So it's coming from England, aber wir benutzen es dann eben auch, wir geben niemals auf. So kann es weitergehen.
Rudolf Stinner, a leading figure in the fight against gambling fraud. Since 2005, he has been investigating organized crime in football. He was UEFA's chief investigator with excellent sources and contacts. Stinner and the state prosecutors know that even the con men have their sights on one of Germany's most sacred institutions.
As far as the first division of the Bundesliga is concerned, we've noticed that the ringleaders have considered bribing players. But they've ultimately shied away from doing so because they consider the cost of bribing a first division player at 150,000 a player to be very high. The original idea had been to buy at least 3 players at a cost of nearly 500,000 euros, so this idea was abandoned.
Bochum District Court is seeing 3 major lawsuits. 15 swindlers have received long prison sentences, starting with the ringleaders of the European-wide betting scandal in 2009. The German-Croatians Mario Svatek and Ante Shapina. Owing to legal errors, proceedings against them will soon reopen. However, individual convictions won't stop organized fraud, because it has long since branched out.
In the course of our investigations, we've been dealing with local groups right across Europe. In other words, there's a group of people in Germany who know one another, and others in Switzerland, in Italy, and in the Balkans. These groups are networked with one another via certain ringleaders. And we've also established that over 2 million euros have been paid in bribes, and that the ringleaders have earned at least 8 million euros tax-free.
An Geldern steuerfrei verdient hat.
Everywhere, criminals are bribing corrupt players and exploiting their weaknesses. Meager salaries, debts, gambling addictions, sporting frustration. and they encounter clubs and associations that are badly, or not at all, prepared for the enemy within. Europa League, 13,000 spectators. And a fixed match played in front of everyone. Rapid Vienna versus Vlasnia Škoda from Albania. The game takes a very strange turn.
Bei dem Spiel konnte ermittelt werden,
With this match, we figured out that bets had been placed in advance,
gewettet worden war,
that Rapid Vienna would score more than 4 goals after a certain stage of the match.
Es war verabredet, dass ein Zeichen
It was
mit der
agreed
Trinkflasche
that the
gesetzt
goalkeeper
wird
would
vom
give a sign
Tormann.
with a water
Wir haben
bottle.
uns das mehrmals angesehen und haben dann
We kept our eyes peeled,
ganz genau
and then we saw
gesehen,
quite
wie
clearly
eine
that the bottle
Trinkflasche
the goalkeeper had
der
previously
Tormann
placed in the
im
side netting
Seitenbereich
was
vorher
now, from the
abgestellt hat.
62nd to the 63rd minute on,
Ab
placed
der 2.
centrally.
oder 63. Minute ist diese Trinkflasche plötzlich in der Mitte des Tores hinten gelegen. Und jeder konnte
And
sehen,
it was
dass
plain
ab
for all
dieser
to see that from that minute on, the
Verteidigung
defence was doing the bare
ihre
minimum.
Aktivitäten
And 4 goals were scored from
wirklich
that
geringes
moment
Maß
on.
eingeschränkt hat. Es sind dann hintereinander
Some of them
Tore
truly
gefallen.
grotesque.
Einige wirklich grotesk.
Flanke von Antti Toba. Verschätzt sich der albanische Schlussmann.
Und somit
And the bet was won.
hat man diese Wette gewonnen.
The Mafia uses games like this for money laundering. But when annual turnover runs into hundreds of millions, it's a different ballgame. It's the business of gambling that has shaken up the business of sports. Insiders know that it can be more lucrative nowadays for a player to lose than win, despite all the grand promises of UEFA boss Michel Platini to pursue a policy of zero tolerance.
Des soucis, ça, on le comprend, mais de toute façon, ça sera tolérance zéro. Le jour où ils seront pris, out.
Out. All of them. Whether they're players, refs, coaches or managers, throw them out.
L'économie du sport n'est pas une économie banale. Elle présente la caractéristique
The sports sector is not a typical branch of the economy.
des têtes d'épingle. Il y a très peu
Its entire
d'activités
economic
économiques qui, en
complexity
effet,
rests on just a
ont
few
comme
shoulders.
fondement
In
une
hardly any
personne,
other
voire une
business
équipe
does
très
everything
restreinte.
depend on one
Donc, en
person
fait, on fait
or one
peser des
small
résultats
team.
sportifs et donc
In
des
sport,
sommes
however,
d'argent
events and
considérables
huge sums of
sur un
money
nombre
depend
très
on a
restreint
small
d'hommes et
circle
de
of people
femmes, souvent
that's
très
often
jeunes
composed of young and
et
extremely
extrêmement
vulnerable
vulnérables.
people.
For the experts, such structures are an open invitation to the gambling mafia.
Il faut bien comprendre que dans
Wherever
tous les
money is
secteurs
involved, we have
économiques,
two
il y a beaucoup
things.
d'argent.
Money is, on the one hand, an incentive. At the same time, however, it's an occasion for large-scale fraud.
Source d'opportunités considérables pour des fraudes massives.
But when it comes to punishing someone who carries out orders to cheat, the legal instruments are found lacking.
Es ist so, dass
The point is that footballers are not seen as cheats who defraud others, because these others don't conclude their own gambling agreements. In other words, a footballer is only an accessory to fraud.
Fußballspieler begeht nur Beihilfe zum Betrug. Das führt
This also
dann auch
means that in
dazu,
terms
dass
of criminal law,
Fußballspieler
footballers do not
strafrechtlich
play a major role
keine
at all.
große Rolle spielen.
For this reason, the judiciary is calling for the creation of a special criminal offence, sports fraud. This would help the clubs too. They are the weakest link in the chain, partly because the sporting authorities are not obliged to pass their information on to the clubs. As a result, even the great FIFA often finds itself in the dark. Meanwhile, another FIFA official, himself a former German criminal investigator, is finding the workings of the gambling mafia a tough nut to crack.
In der Breite war der Fußball
Football
nicht
was not prepared for anything on this scale.
Ziel kann ein Amateurverein sein.
The target may be an amateur association or a professional
Das
club.
kann
It may be an amateur referee or a professional. We've seen it all. We've even seen cases in which criminals serve as club sponsors and more or less take over a club themselves.
The investigators have a tough job because they have to penetrate two hermetic worlds, those of football and those of gambling. How do bogus bets influence the course of a match? What mechanisms are at play? With what's known as live betting, you can bet on anything and everything. The number of corners, free kicks, red cards, the next goal and who scores it. The result of a match is often a secondary issue. Now, anyone can bet live on their PC while a match is in progress. A technological revolution and an Achilles heel.
Mais pour toutes les instances de contrôle, de supervision...
All the authorities, from sports associations through police and the judiciary, have serious problems maintaining an overview of live betting, not to mention regulating it.
Live betting signifie qu'en fait, pendant une période
Because
de temps
in a relatively short space of time, 90 minutes for a football match, 2 or 3 hours for a tennis match, huge sums of money are bet on websites. How can you keep tabs on
dans le
that?
monde sur des milliers de sites qui vont se concentrer. Quelle capacité de contrôle et surveillance a-t-on à ce moment-là?
We used to believe that by installing an early warning system, we were largely eliminating the danger of match fixing. I don't want to say that the attempt failed, it's too early for that, but we've all got to look and see why we weren't warned. Sport Radar is the most popular sporting radar system, high-tech and present across the globe. The company works for the German Football Association and for UEFA and says it follows over 40,000 football matches a year and 6,000 betting opportunities per game. It knows all the dubious characters. However, the crux here too is live betting, which is why Sport Radar rejects the term early warning system.
For match fixers, live gambling has two great advantages. Gamblers can place bigger bets, and neither the prosecution authorities nor the sports associations can intervene in the process. In other words, there's no longer any early warning system. The terminology in this debate surprises us, because the people involved surely know that well over 90% of all manipulation occurs in the live domain.
A technology war is raging in the hazy world of gambling. It's a war of algorithms, computing power and software. Who is betting and on what? Where are the bets coming from? And is everyone involved willing to subject themselves to supervision?
We cover the entire relevant worldwide gambling market, and we assume that we can identify over 90% of all the rigged matches.
Die Täter, die haben natürlich in den letzten Jahren
The
gelernt.
culprits have obviously learned a few things in the past decade too. They also know about these developments, and they avoid these systems. And one way to avoid them is for me to place a dirty bet with an illegal bet supplier, knowing that he will not pass his odds onto an alarm system or an operator. In this way, this information never reaches the warning system.
Somit kommt diese Information nie zum Warnsystem.
Asia. Betting biotope for the really big money. Hong Kong and Macau, Singapore and Manila. International gambling fraud. Its growth and its dimensions are inconceivable without the Asian gambling market. Here, different rules apply.
Der Gewinn, den ein europäischer
The
Anbieter
profits
macht,
made by a European supplier arise when someone loses a bet.
in Asien ist es so,
In Asia, however, all that counts is the turnover.
der asiatische Wettanbieter,
To online
der
bookmakers
ist
in
es im
Asia,
Grunde
it's
einfach
basically
gleich, ob die
irrelevant
Wette
whether
verliert
they win a bet or lose it.
Für ihn ist
For them,
der
only the
Umsatz das
turnover
Entscheidende.
counts.
Because when turnovers run into billions, even the smallest profit margins add up to millions. The bet's on, 24 hours a day, without limits or controls, and anonymous too. In Asia, bets are placed via middlemen, so-called betting agents. We meet one of these agents. The man has already arranged some big dirty bets in Asia for Europeans engaging in gambling fraud. He also knows that games were fixed. He introduces us to the way his gambling market works, but he wants to remain anonymous.
In Asia, you don't have to go to a bookmaker. I can open an account for you and grant you a loan. No name or passport number. The loan, tens of thousands or even millions, depends on who you are. There are many different levels of agents. Those right at the top don't know who the customer at the bottom is. They see only the money that flows in.
The thrills and spills of sport are just minor details. All that counts is the money. The agent doesn't mind whether a game is fixed or not. Once they know, they also want a share. At the same time, the bookmaker minimizes his own risk too. The perfect money-making machine.
How important is it for a super master agent to know if the game is fishy or not?
If he knows that the match is fixed, the agent takes action on this information. I don't care how you earn your money. I just want to earn mine. If you win, I win too. All the bookies want to do is avoid debts. If a lot of money is placed on Team A, they raise the odds for Team B to attract new customers on that side.
The motivation for fraud is greed. All that's needed is an opportunity and a weapon. Online gambling provides the weapon for free, and the opportunity is there to be created. Meanwhile, the culprits are harming the bookmakers with matches that don't exist, phantom matches. The 16th of January 2012, under-21s, Turkmenistan versus the Maldives. The score, 3-2. Friendlies don't have to be registered with FIFA. Venue, Kuala Lumpur. Kickoff, 10 a.m. Allegedly. Because, in fact, this match never took place.
Das sind Gruppierungen, die einfach
These are groups that use the bookmakers to pretend that certain fictitious things have happened in a match.
Nach einem Drehbuch
Things that people bet on.
Live vorzugaukeln, wo dann eben
And although they never happened,
gewettet werden
the bookmakers have to pay out.
und eben die Wettanbieter zahlen müssen, weil sie ja dagegen wetten, nicht? Und
And that naturally results in heavy losses for the bookmaker.
By now, there is so much money involved that it defies all efforts to impose controls. Wagers of up to €1 million on a big match are no problem, before or after kickoff. There is one match that trumps them all, the final of the UEFA Champions League, the world's most important club competition. The estimated betting volume of over €1 billion on the match between Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund can no longer be traced or verified. That's why the Mafia like betting on sports. On the one hand, they can maximize profits by fixing games, and on the other, it's a very efficient money laundering system.
Ne soyons pas naïfs.
It's quite obvious. A large part of the money laundering from organized crime takes place via the online bookmakers because they can hardly be controlled. Money laundering is an extremely important function for organized criminals. They use it to transfer money that's been earned by criminal means, for example from drug smuggling, prostitution or illegal arms dealing, into the legal economy. Losses are practically an investment, because without laundering it first, they would not be able to use the money.
Organized criminals will accept losses of 30 to 40% of their illegally obtained money, if the rest is clean. The fact that sports bets are a popular conduit for money laundering is partly down to the fact that losses can be limited. The procedure for football bets, for example, is a simple but very effective rule of thumb. The gambler picks a match with very similar odds for the various permutations. A victory is worth €2.32, a draw €3.10, and a defeat €2.70. While an honest gambler will wonder whether to back a win or defeat, 1 or 2, or an X for a draw, An organised criminal will bet 10,000 euros on each of the three options. If the result is a victory, he gets 23,200 euros back. If it's a draw, he gets 31,000. And if it's a defeat, he gets 27,000 euros back. So his maximum possible loss is 23%, considerably less than the usual 30 to 40%. The only more profitable method is to have the matches fixed first.
Profits from match fixing and gambling are at least as high as profits from the drug trade. The more drugs a smuggler is caught with, the longer the prison sentence. That's an accepted fact. But if you're prosecuted for match fixing or betting fraud, you've got a good chance of getting away with a suspended sentence, or even less. So it's maximum profit with a minimum of risk. The last football scandal in Italy came to light in a strange and abnormal way. At first, there was no talk of bets or match fixing, but of poisoning. The public prosecutor, Guido Salvini, has investigated the case.
During a match in Cremona, Cremonese-Paganese, Lega Pro, some of the Cremonese players were below par, tired, finding it difficult to play. Analyses were done, and it was discovered that probably in the changing rooms before the match, in a drink of some sort, they'd been given a tranquilizer, a sleeping pill. We started to investigate this very strange event, and from the telephone taps on the first suspects, the investigation spread to include a series of people: betting agency managers, players, former players, coaches, who operated in various parts of Italy, involving many matches, especially in the B Division and Lega Pro, with an operating mode that was always the same: convincing a few players to play in such a way that the outcome of the match was entirely predictable.
One of those being tapped was Paoloni, who would become a main figure in the investigation. Paoloni is a particular character. He's a goalkeeper, which is a key role. A goalkeeper alone can determine the outcome of a match. On the pitch, Paoloni's a good keeper. But he clearly has behavioural issues. He's well paid. He's always had good contracts, over 100,000 euros net per year. But he spends a lot, and in a stupid way. He bets on tennis matches, the horses, online poker, and he loses a lot. A football player's life is a strange one. People know his face, and he's idolised wherever he goes. These are young 20, 21-year-olds who've so much money and no idea how to spend it all. A great deal depends on their friendships.
It
all started last September when I met Erodiani. He had and still has a betting agency. I met him and started gambling at his place, on credit. You said I met Erodiani and gambled at his place on credit. I was hooked and I bet more and more. At one point they asked you to do something to pay your debts.
A un certo punto però loro ti chiedono di fare delle cose per rientrare di questi soldi.
Sì.
Yes.
Diciamo che inizia.
That was the start.
Sì. Io infatti
Yes.
lo conobbi
I met the
a
guy in
settembre, fino a
September.
dicembre non ho avuto problemi.
Up until December, I had no problems with him.
Il 7 gennaio venne lui.
On January the 7th, he turned up with the other guy, Pirani, the dentist, at my home in Cremona.
A casa mia a Cremona.
I was there with my wife and
Stavo a casa con
daughter.
mia moglie e mia figlia. Vengono su.
They came there, and Erodiani told me I owed him 100,000 euros. So they said, if he fixes a match or two, that'll settle the debt, and we can be friends again.
Amici come prima.
When he saw I didn't want to do as he asked, Pirani took me aside and showed me a prescription. I saw it had my wife's name on it and the word Minius. The rest was handwritten. I couldn't make it out. I asked him what it meant. He said, "Remember the Cremonese-Paganese match when you felt ill?" I said, "Yes." He said, "This is the pharmaceutical product used." At first, I didn't believe it. I really didn't. But then, it was my wife's name. I didn't want. I was afraid. There was a prescription, so you were afraid of blackmail. You were afraid someone would accuse you of putting Minias in the drinks. My thoughts were spinning. It's my wife's name. It'll come back to me. My work. I didn't know what was the right thing to do. So at that time, you decided to collaborate with them and try to pay off this debt through betting. You accepted, saying, "Okay, let's see what I have to do to pay off my debt through bets." They asked you for definite match outcomes. Yes, for definite match outcomes. Imagine the psychological state of a player who, a few minutes before a match, receives a call on his mobile from a stranger who describes to him the private life and movements of his wife or children. The athlete in question will become very flexible. It's as simple as that.
Money, bribes, murder. Anyone who strays offside the money game is taking a big risk.
Kevin and Cici were two Chinese nationals and were very popular students at Newcastle University. We discovered that they were working for people unidentified in Hong Kong and mainland China and organising and commentating on football matches. There is a saying in England in terms of the investigation is, if you know how somebody lived, it is a clue to how they may have died. Kevin, in particular, was undercutting, do you understand? Undercutting the opposition. He was basically doing it for a cheaper rate than some of the other organised criminals. He was going behind the backs of some of the people who didn't like what was taking place. And he was also making a lot of money out of it. And if that money was going into his pocket, it wasn't going into their pockets. I have been involved in over 100 homicide investigations in the UK. I have rarely seen this level of violence involved. Cici, in particular, had her hands tied behind her back with brown paper tape, bound and bound and bound. The same with her feet. She had been attacked in the bed, probably a blunt instrument, possibly a hammer or an axe, taken to her head and bludgeoned to death in her bed. Kevin had been taken into the bedroom. He had 70+ injuries to his face and to his head. He had his throat cut from ear to ear, like this. They even tortured the pet family cat, which was drowned in a bucket in the bathroom. The man who was ultimately convicted, Guang Hu Sao, was a hard man, an organised criminal, a man who would strike fear into people if they crossed him. And I think he was sent to deliver a very clear message, not just to Cici and Kevin, but anybody who crossed those types of people. You understand? If you think about it, if Cici and Kevin had earned £300,000 in 2 years, and they were low-level people, okay, what were the people at the top of the tree making in terms of cash? Big business, big business.
And this big business is spreading around the world, and the syndicates are growing with it. Bulgarian and Serbian mafia collude with Italian betting fraudsters. There are criminal connections between Turkey and Germany. The Albanians operate in Belgium. And all these groups have links to the Chinese triads and the mafia rings in Singapore. Within a few years, the gambling fraudsters have woven a network on a scale usually associated only with big multinational companies. These networks have a single goal: to influence sporting events around the world. For the moment, at least, the cheats have to play their own part if matches are to end the way they want them to. And the best way to do so is with money. Anyone who wants to fix a match must pay. Players, referees, club officials, those in the game know who will go along with it. The rest, say the criminals, is basic stuff.
I don't give any respect for any footballers because I've dealt with so many. Not everybody is Cristiano Ronaldo or David Beckham. We cater and we want to contact below average players. That's our main target. If we get from top tier, good for us. And most footballers have a lot of bad habits. They drink, they womanize, they gamble, and they party. You think by playing football they can make money to do all this? I doubt so.
The defendant at this trial is Eric Ding, a nightclub owner. He's accused of trying to bribe 3 Lebanese referees with money and prostitutes. Singapore, a tax haven and a center of gambling fraud.
Singapore is almost the HQ, you know, the headquarters for betting and fixing and such things. And we have very good contact in Europe and around the world. Anything which comes by, you know, may it be Europe, may it be South America, may it be Central America, or may it be Asia. If it's a good opportunity, we definitely want to do it.
And yet the things of this world are considered third-rate goods on the global match-fixing market. Eng Tan Seet is known as Dan Tan. Italian investigators believe he is the ringleader behind many fixed matches in Europe. Now he's been arrested in Singapore.
It's well known that Italian investigators are trying to have Mr. Tan extradited from Singapore. But other European countries are also conducting investigations. For example, we've established here in Germany that certain people from our circle of suspects were in touch with this person in Singapore.
Dan Tan is the main man, right? Because I know Dan Tan from 1987, right? He's very clever. He's very shrewd, he's very cunning. Sometimes I have the contacts of the players, but I don't have the finance, you know, to pay the players up front. So I seek for help from big bosses. We call them financiers.
Dan Tan's case shows how hard it is to catch the bosses. Singapore needed more than a year to carry out the international arrest warrant. It doesn't have an extradition agreement with Italy. But even if he is brought to justice, there are many more fish in the sea.
Singapore is
no more of a city in which dubious characters are in action and whose main goal is gambling fraud than Istanbul, for instance.
Als ihr vorrangiges Ziel sehen.
We know that equally dubious types are located in Istanbul. Criminal groups who all have the same thing in mind. There's a gang in Skopje, in Macedonia. There's one in Zagreb, in Belarus. A massive one in Moscow. In various cities in the Baltic states. As you can see, there are plenty more left to keep it going.
Also Sie sehen, es geht schon munter weiter.
The German Football Association alone has nearly 7 million members, more than 25,000 clubs, and the gambling illness. An example of many, the Bremen League. It's a perfectly normal evening on the training grounds. Singapore is a long way away, but the virus of fraud is to be found everywhere in the football organism. The stakes are higher in the professional leagues, but the German amateur leagues are harder to monitor.
Dennis, komm mal raus!
Ich weiß, dass mein Torwart von mir angesprochen worden ist.
I know one of my goalkeepers was approached at half-time when we were 1-0 up, and he was told, if you let one in, we will make it worth your while. And I got wind of this and said to the keeper, if you concede a single goal today, whether we win or lose, it will be your last game for this club, full stop. But we won the game 1-0, and that cleared up any suspicions we might have had about it.
Bets on matches in leagues as low as the 5th division are not unusual. The result is a toxic mix of gambling passion and match fixing, and not a TV camera for miles. In the big cities in Germany, insider knowledge gets around quickly. The biggest risk is posed by the players themselves. Some turn their knowledge into money, even betting against their own team. Gambling fever has taken hold of Germany's clubs. We conducted an investigation. We visited clubs in Bremen and Kiel, and we found out that more than half of all club members had placed sports bets at one time or another. But we know that only about 3 to 6% of the normal population gamble on sporting events. And about 9% of club members manifested problematic or even pathological gambling behavior. In the normal population, that figure is about only 1%. These figures are alarming. Just a few years ago, after a series of conspicuous bets were placed, Bremen police intervened in a match between Werder Bremen's third team and FC Bremerhaven just before kick-off. Since then, there have been numerous reports of crooked goings-on. The clubs are powerless as long as they have no reliable evidence. One coach was willing to confide in us on condition of anonymity.
I know that one of my players used his insider knowledge to bet against his own team. Once I got a call from Austria. It almost bowled me over. I was told there had been conspicuously large bets on a match involving my team, with 4-figure stakes. They said the gamblers involved were a player on the team and a supporter. I know also of private poker evenings with stakes so high that I don't even want to think about where the money comes from.
DFB rules prohibit a player from betting on or against his own team. But hardly anyone has heard of this regulation. A former player from a Berlin league told us that games were often fixed. Shady bets are the logical conclusion.
Well, it's an unwritten law that the last 3 or 4 matches of a season are fixed. That's the way it is. Gambling is rife in the lower leagues and the regional league. The players themselves are avid gamblers. And in the lower leagues, wages are often paid late or not at all. So there's a great temptation to make a fast buck every now and again.
Three matches fixed in one of the cleanest markets thought of. Germany. Time for the football associations to react. The men in grey suits have some high-tech equipment in their gear bags. Time for some extra coaching on match fixing. It's a nationwide prevention campaign. Young players especially have to be warned about the dangers of gambling fraud. They're told that if they are approached by crooked players, they can call the association ombudsman in confidence.
I believe there's always room for improvement. One thing I believe is that we must get more closely involved with the players, the clubs and the officials and intensify our personal contacts. In my case, as ombudsman, the affected player has to make the decision. Should I call him up or not? It's up to the player to decide. Is there someone I can trust in the club? That should be the first port of call.
Courses, e-learning programs, roundtable discussions in sports academies. But it's still no problem to place bets on youth and amateur matches that are usually below the authorities' radar. And there's no video evidence.
There's no
TV coverage of the 5th Division. So if there's an incident, it can't be proven either way, whether it was illegal or not. In that sense, I'm of the opinion that we have to prohibit all gambling on lower league matches.
Amateur matches have no place on a gambling slip. In other words, online bookmakers such as Tipico should limit their betting services to the top leagues, if at all.
Mobilwetten in sicheren Händen mit mir und Tipico.
A TV commercial featuring former German star goalkeeper Oliver Kahn. Tipico is the market leader in Germany. The business of sporting bets is booming, and the bookmaker has no intention of removing amateur sport from the betting slips.
It's always possible to fix a match. There's a demand for these matches. At the moment, we're operating in the lower leagues, but I have to assume from the outset that every team wants to win its match. Because if they don't, I've got a big problem, because I'm the one paying out, nobody else. The bookmakers would end up paying the tab. Nevertheless, we're well advised to offer bets on these matches. We do so to counteract the competition from illegal local bookmakers, which we want to put a stop to.
The thing is, companies like Tipico, Bet3000 or bwin are already operating in a kind of legal grey zone, as long as the new licenses have yet to be awarded in accordance with the revised national law on gambling. Nevertheless, the Malta-based Tipico is growing rapidly. It already has more than 800 shops in Germany, and that number is set to go up. The bets offered by Tipico recently included amateur matches and an under-16 international between Belgium and Germany, a youth match.
Well, I'm generally against gambling on youth matches, whether in Asia or here. I just don't see the need for money to be made by gambling on youth matches. Of course, we think hard before we offer that kind of bet, and we look at the betting patterns, including on the Asian markets. Because there is generally TV coverage of youth internationals, we also have TV footage as documentary evidence of what happens in the game. I think the fact that we have this TV footage serves as a deterrent from the outset.
Not true, says the German Football Association. There is no question of blanket TV coverage of German youth internationals. The match in question was not broadcast on TV, neither in Germany nor in Belgium. So Tipico is still all smiles with the Titan Kahn. He is sponsor of several Bundesliga clubs and a marketing partner of the pay TV channel Sky. The message is that sporting bets are just good, clean fun. But is everything really in safe hands? This is about nothing less than the most popular game in the world. If certain people knew beforehand how a match was going to end, it would sound the death knell for football. Dan Tan's arrest in Singapore may be a victory for the authorities, but the Asian gambling market will remain beyond their control for now. In Germany, it's a safe bet that more nasty surprises are in store. For the many-headed monster that is gambling fraud quickly grows new heads again when one is cut off. The lure of profit is just too great.
I don't think a stop can be put to it. On the contrary, we reckon the findings from the case in Bochum will just turn out to be the tip of the iceberg.
partendo dal poco.
It starts out small.
Ovviamente ciascuno,
Obviously, everyone, the players, the organizers, the financiers, the foreign counterparts, they all make a profit. It becomes something that should be regulated, just as we regulate secret information about companies. In legal terms, this type of betting is called insider trading. It's not allowed for companies listed on the stock market. It is punishable. It should also be strongly punished in football, which has become a financial market too.
Queste condotte andrebbero punite fortemente anche nel calcio, che è diventato un mercato finanziario.
Many states and sports federations all over the world have been slow to understand and perceive the fraudulent aspects of many contemporary sports.
Ça s'appelle tout simplement l'aveuglement.
They're simply blind.
Sans avoir une vision trop idéalisée de ce qu'a été le sport.
Without idealizing sport as it was in pre-modern or ancient times, we must admit that today these professional sporting activities are becoming a show.
De plus en plus un spectacle. Et quand un sport
When sport turns into a show, it undergoes a certain degeneration, a corruption. It's like that of wrestling.
Avec le catch.
These days, nobody thinks wrestling is anything other than a great fake, a somewhat comical act. Nice to watch, but nothing more.
You close down all betting companies. Then you see real football. But I think this will never stop. It's just like prostitution, same thing. How can you stop prostitution, right? It's the oldest business in the world. Same thing.
For the record, the final score in the youth match between Union Berlin and Osnabrück was 2-0. Good for Berlin, bad for us. We had bet on more than 4 goals, so our wager is lost. Once again, an Asian bookmaker is €10 better off.